All right, so today we're going to dive into, of course, the charts. And of course, it's going to be fun because we've got one of our friends and neighbors back in the house.
Great to be on. It was
Yeah.
boring for July, very flat, but finally some action, so it's exciting.
Absolutely. All right, you guys are going to love it. I think you guys are going to get some big alpha today, so make sure and tune into the whole show. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, let's get into it today, Evan. First thing I want to jump on to is all of this noise around the most recent wallet moves around Bitcoin. I'll jump to this first tweet. This was a little bit around the Bitcoin wallet that had accumulated a lot of Bitcoin since May. A lot of people were jumping to conclusion that this was a BlackRock wallet, that there was a lot of scenarios that were playing out, but it's basically 3 billion over about 3 months. Now, there is also some indicators that this may have been actually a Robinhood wallet. And if you look at this chart right here, it shows the actual accumulation layer of Bitcoin for the Robinhood wallet, which goes right in line with, as you'll notice right up there in the top left hand. This came from Arkham Intelligence. If you guys have used Arkham before, it's basically kind of like reverse engineering wallet addresses, so it can track wallet movements. And sure enough, $3 billion over the last 3 months. So maybe a little Bitcoin, a little bit of the Bitcoin FUD out there to drive the market. Maybe it worked today.
Yeah, a little bit. That's interesting. I didn't see that, but yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of those. Sometimes they'll show you something, sometimes not.
Exactly. When you look at the charts right now in terms of Bitcoin, and you look at where the market is, we just are having a pump currently as we're recording this. What do you see right now in the short term versus, say, maybe over the next 30 to 60 days?
Yeah, I'll start with the short term here because it's a little bit more interesting. Obviously, you know, we have, if you're looking at real short-term timeframes, the 2-hour looks pretty good. You have a nice double bottom that you saw here right around a big area, right around 25, which is a huge area. Money flow coming up on the 2-hour, you get your little trigger wave right down there. So most likely, you know, if we kind of map out from, you know, our double bottom pattern, technical target could bring us up to approximately around high 26s, almost 27K. If we move our spiral lines a little bit, this area, low 27Ks, could be huge. I would say to be safe, take some profits at high 26s, which does seem pretty likely. The other thing I'm looking at for the short term here is actually on the 10-hour. That's a nice bullish div. You have momentum waves coming down as price is coming, momentum waves coming up as price is coming down on Bitcoin. That usually does break upward. And the fact that we got above this point, this is a huge area at 26.3, a volume area low, that's pretty bullish because we're breaking back through that point. So that's a bullish sign. If we lose this though, that's where things get more bearish. So that's a good place below. Leave some wiggle room below here is a good place for a stop loss if you're trying to go long.
I was looking at, you know, the sentiment basically on Bitcoin. If you guys are following our CPI, this was an interesting level off period because right here over the last 10 days, we saw sentiment, of course, coming down from this drop, which we were really pegging almost back to that high around 63. This was back in early August, back to now where we are now. And the interesting thing is that amplification kind of leveled off here, which was a good indicator that we might start to see some upward movement because typically what we've seen is when amplification starts to level off like that, there's only one place in most cases for it to go, and it's usually been up. So right now with it being up a little bit, you're longing this right now.
I am longing this, but don't get mad at me if it gets stopped out. I made a lot of money shorting, so if this one fails, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, all right, so longing Bitcoin right now. Okay, so a couple of things that play into this. Macro we're going to get into in a second. We'll break down a few things that are kind of leaning into where the overarching markets are. Before we jump over to that, I want to go back to Robinhood for a second because I was looking at this story right here. Robinhood turned profitable. This was in Q2, but their crypto revenues are declining, even though now we could be actually seeing some accumulation in Robinhood's wallet. If you look at Hood, the stock, where do you see that stock going in terms of, in comparison? I look at it versus, say, if you wanted to leverage against, say, Coinbase.
That's an interesting one. Let's get the chart real quick with Robinhood. I mean, I think it's a real good thing. I think ultimately the fundamentals are pretty good. Becoming profitable, that's really good. When I look at the charts, you know, I think we're still really struggling. So right here, when you see this is some type of kind of Wyckoff accumulation pattern.
Right.
First bottom, second bottom, kind of third bottom right there. making, higher lows, which is pretty good. If you do break out of this point, you're able to break back above, what is it, around $11. You might have a technical target up here around 18. Keep in mind, some of these high wicks around 16 could be pretty big as well. If we look at market size for a little bit, kind of on the macro, what could happen here, does look like you may have some more downside momentum, especially with the weekly. If that money flow wants to come down and the S&P 500 comes down more, I would say it's likely that we would do what we've always done, come back down to potentially $8. But I do think eventually you're going to break upward, whether it's a year from now or 6 months from now, wherever it may be. You're eventually probably going to break up to around that target at $18. So long term, next couple of years, very bullish.
Yeah. So Hood trading right now at 10.50 about. But has had a nice little move over the past couple of days. When you look at that low right there, we're talking about 6, almost 7% on that move. In comparison to Coinbase, of course, having a little bit of a spike just after. This is on the 4-hour right here. So again, is this a good spot for you maybe to enter into something like a Coinbase? If you look at Coinbase, it has been on the decline with Bitcoin because it goes kind of like the way of Bitcoin. If you were investing in Bitcoin or Hood, because that's kind of the comparison here, which one would you take?
Bitcoin. I mean, if I like the fundamentals of Bitcoin.
When I say Bitcoin, I mean Coinbase.
Oh, Coinbase.
Coinbase or Hood.
Oh, man, that's tough, Paul. Whatever has a lower market cap, probably, in terms of more upside potential,
that's gonna be Robinhood. I think they're
probably Robinhood a little bit. But if you look at Coinbase, let's take a look at the chart right here in Coinbase. This one's interesting because we broke out of this reverse head and shoulders, and we had our technical target, which was a little bit higher. It was right around 137. However, if we zoom in here, look at this major point where we rejected back in August of 22, 114. About a year later, we couldn't, come back above that point. So that's kind of a bearish sign, at least for the macro, the short term, next few months. Potentially, if we do lose this $68 area, that's where it gets more bearish to potentially come back to, $50. I think there's a good shot that January bottom could be kind of the bottom. Keep in mind, this does kind of follow Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin goes back to the low 20s, it wouldn't surprise me if this comes back to around $50. If we look at the weekly here, yeah, this was more bearish. I drew this on the weekly. See how these RSIs are coming down? A lot of times when they come down, they continue to come down, and you'll come deeper into the money flow on the red one last time here. And if we gotta estimate kind of where that could bring us down to, it would probably be that 55-point area. I'd say bad recession, sure, you can make a double bottom or something, but most likely back to the 50s, I would guess.
What are your thoughts right now on Bitcoin holding its current, say, in the 25, 28 range right now? Because that's been a trading range that we've had here for quite some time. What's your thought on that one right now? And if you look at what kind of pressures we are seeing here from the macro side.
So let's take a look at the macro chart right now. I think it's kind of unlikely that for the next week or so, we do have Powell speaking on Friday. That could kind of throw a wrench into the pump up, my guess here. Yep. But kind of what we're seeing is, I just look at the macro here, what normally happens. This bear market 2015, double bottom. This is very interesting here. In August of 2015, you came down 37% for Bitcoin, but that was it. You were done. So if we do dump down farther, potentially, in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, that could be kind of it theoretically. Sometimes these big moves happen quickly. I think the 300 weekly moving average is a big place right here. And what I want to show you is on the 3-week right here, we have a trigger wave to the down point, very similar to this 3-week trigger wave to the down point last September of 2019. If we map it out like this, I'm not going to count the pandemic, but if we map it out like this, that would bring us right to around 21K. Your 300 weekly moving average, let's get that up right here, is going to be around that same area, low 20s, which we could potentially hit that September, October. Keep in mind, pre-election years, Bitcoin and traditional markets towards the end of them are very bearish. And then in the election year, you do better. So I would say more downside potential next few months. And then into the halvening, we're going to do a lot better, I think.
Yeah, interesting. A couple of things that could cause more pressure on Bitcoin, along with other traditional assets out there. Right now, just in from the Kobe letter, interest rate cuts now no longer expected to begin until June 2024. That's quite a bit longer into the cycle of 2024. Also times well with the halvening, which is in May. So that is going to be interesting to watch. 3 months ago, futures prices were 4 rate cuts in 2023. Didn't happen. Not going to happen. Meanwhile, the odds of additional rate cuts this year remain at about 44%. So nobody's really looking at this. Fed is going to be a long pause. Most likely. Do you feel like with the FOMC coming up, do you feel like Chair Powell is going to hold or raise?
The next one, it's probably going to be a hold. I think we're going to see a long pause. If we do see more upward momentum with oil, what I'm keeping my eye on, and commodities, there may be one more raise, but I think either way, it's going to generally be where it is right now until something kind of breaks. By something breaking, potentially the S&P 500 hitting a lower low.
Right.
I don't know if we're in a pause until June. I think they could pivot a little bit earlier if the S&P 500 does make a lower low before them. They could pause and or pivot in potentially March even. So keep that in mind. I think June is a while to wait.
Yeah, that would be a big stretch into 2024.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one right here that shows the trajectory of what GDP is going to look like by, I think it's the year 2030. And you'll notice here with both the G7 and the BRICS nations, this starts to get really interesting in the next few years. This, of course, kind of going right into where we are right now. And this is my question to you. If you look at the dollar value, the Dixie, just in general, and you look at both risk assets and the potential of what we could see of some de-dollarization, how much of an impact do you think that's going to have on crypto in general? Let's just say ETH or Bitcoin.
It's bullish, definitely. I mean, I keep my eye kind of on the charts here, and I think sometimes those news articles can kind of already be factored in terms of price for, let's say, the next 6 months, say the next year. And when I look at the DXY right here, what I see in the monthly, which is very interesting, we're hitting a big point right here at 103, and we bounced off of high 90s, which is really big psychologically. You're coming up on Market Cipher B on the monthly to potentially give you a trigger wave. Now, the last time this has happened was a while ago. Last time you saw a trigger wave like this was back in 1999, before that kind of recession. Now, this would probably bring you up quite a bit for the DXY, but maybe not as much as many would kind of, guess here. If you do that from the bottom there, that's potentially up to 129. Now, I don't think it's going to go that high because the Fed's probably going to pivot. We're going to see quantitative easing, but over the next, few months into early next year, I could see a double top 114, 117 potentially for the DXY. But long term, it's more of a matter of, the Dixie's in trouble. It's more of a matter of when, not if. So those things macro very bearish. I think into 2025 we'll see the dollar collapse.
Well, if you consider that, and along with, if you believe in de-dollarization that is occurring on the global scale, it really boils down to what countries are going to settle trade in dollars. If you look at this tweet, Russia is talking about right now that BRICS needs to abandon the US dollar and settle in local currency, which is what they've kind of been talking about. Many people were speculating whether gold would be played into the BRICS, we'll call it their reserve currency, but instead they're going to their local currency. But even at that point, you're talking about some of the biggest nations out there in terms of just capital as well as population.
Right.
China, India, right now the two most populated countries, and you look at the growth of these countries in GDP, if they're settling in their own currencies, that's going to obviously create less demand on the dollar, hence meaning less demand on the Dixie, which is going to be an interesting play. So with that, would you be in a position where you would say, okay, I'm going to just start moving as much money into what asset?
Gold, silver, Bitcoin. Okay. Gold, silver, Bitcoin. Gold, silver, those three. But the main area, I think, too, is like the Bitcoin accumulation phase that we're in. And just on the macro, let me show you real quick what I'm looking at on the weekly. I stopped DCAing as we've been in the green here on the weekly for Bitcoin, because I think the same thing is going to kind of happen where I want the want this money flow to come back into the red right here for more of a DCA place over here. So we're coming back. We'll probably be back in the red, in a few weeks or so. And I think from September is just an amazing opportunity to DCA into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a diversified portfolio of altcoins, depending on your risk tolerance, from September into pre-halvening. So probably September into March, which would coincide very, very well with the 4-year cycle. If you look back 4 years ago, worked perfectly. This type of area. 4 years before that, we were just straight up, but worked very perfectly in that area too. Speaking
of ETH, let's go to that chart. I want to take a look at that, because right now ETH obviously on the move, really lockstep with what Bitcoin's response has been. But if you look at Ethereum and what's been happening in the ecosystem around Base, which we'll talk about Coinbase in a second and their blockchain, because of the impact on Ethereum, what do you like about Ethereum right now? Would it be, if you were weighting your portfolio right now, where would you stand between those two assets, Bitcoin, ETH?
Bitcoin, ETH. So it would have to lean towards Bitcoin right now. For longer term, let me show you my chart. And typically what happens here is Ethereum bottoms against Bitcoin. It bottomed against Bitcoin in September of 2019. 4-year cycle, it was actually bottom. Where was it? Yeah, bottom in December, but against Bitcoin, it was in September back here. 4-year cycle would tell us September is going to potentially be that area. Later this year is potentially going to be that area where Ethereum bottoms against Bitcoin. The first time ever we have here on Market Cypher A blood diamond on Ethereum, money flow coming out, trigger wave on Market Cypher B. And this is also the Wyckoff kind of accumulation phase that I want to show you right here. We got our first bottom here, B, you got your second bottom, and the third bottom. This would coincide with the 4-year cycle. Could be somewhere around maybe September, October, December, later this year, somewhere between, I'd say 1,200 on the lower end, could be some type of double bottom, 1,000, something like that. I mean, if things get really ugly, maybe you could make a lower low, but I'm kind of not thinking that right now. So macro on Ethereum is going to be a bit more bearish, but I think coming into September, just in about a week from now, that's a good DCA opportunity to start in Ethereum. What I'm also looking at to start DCAing into Ethereum is this weekly, like Bitcoin, to come back into the red in this weekly. Once this comes back into the red, maybe we'll be at 1,200 by then. That's a good place to start DCAing in until pre-happening around March.
One thing to note with Ethereum and just in general, the use case of how Ethereum is playing out, Coinbase moved to support USDC, now showing the importance of interest income, which of course USC ERC20, we're going to see a lot more of that transaction. Then you look at just this right here, Base exceeding Ethereum daily transactions. Part of this because of Friendtech. I know it's the latest and hottest little bit of action within the ETH ecosystem. The point is we're seeing more and more projects. This is just the beginning. That's going to drive, one, the demand for ETH, and it's also going to obviously drive transactions as well as NFT, a lot more focus on the projects that are circling around Base. With that being the case, I'm actually in opposition with you on that one. I think I would hold more ETH than I would hold Bitcoin for this next run.
Well, how about starting in September, though? How about an accumulation of more ETH starting in a week from now into March? So hold more Bitcoin, but as gradually.
For the short term.
But gradually as you get into September, into March, as history repeats from what we did last time.
Yeah, okay. So that, if I was looking at long or short-term trades, swing trades like that, okay, you could see there's an argument for Bitcoin in that scenario.
Yes.
I just look at these projects that are really piling into this. And of course, Coinbase, if they get good news, I mean, this is just going to open up. These guys are going to get slutty. They're going to do some as our boys would say. they're not going to do anything crazy. Here's of course Rand talking about Base taking off, and it's outperforming Arbitrum, Optimism. And if you're early, there's going to be some huge opportunities. I would agree with this to a certain extent. If you look at OP right now, which is what Base's platform is built on, the idea of just trading that token, do you like Optimism?
So right now, Optimism for the short term, I kind of like what I'm seeing, just like Bitcoin. And we rejected off of this pocket right here at about $1.78, came down. Now regaining that level, similar to if Bitcoin could pump up to maybe 27, you probably could get up a little bit higher here with this money flow. I like the money flow coming up in the 6 hour, potentially to come up to $1.80 again. More than that would be a bit of a stretch in this environment where the altcoins just kind of getting, you know, obliterated. So I would be taking some profits around $1.80. On the macro, it kind of looks like on the bright side for a lot of these altcoins is I don't think you have much more than a 40 or 50% downside for many of them.
From where it is now.
Yeah, if they survive, you know what I mean? So I think potentially you could see a double bottom. You know, this area is huge, around $1 into the end of the year. But long term, if this could do well and make new all-time highs during, the next bull run, I think I don't know if I have the full chart here, but if this could get above that February high, I mean, you could easily get up to $7 potentially next bull run. That could be a good goal for, from here. So good, 3-4x at least, maybe even higher.
Yeah. Solana announced this news, of course. Well, it's kind of old news, but new news at the same time. But Solana Pay now integrating with Shopify. So this is going to open up some of the Solana chain over to one of the biggest retail platforms out there, being Shopify. So with that being the case, and we've had a lot of Solana news here recently. There's been so many things that are just active within their projects. What are your thoughts on Solana right now, trading in the short term?
So short term, similar to a lot of other things. Let's start with the short term, and I'll show you some of the more less optimistic things. But right here, you have a nice bull div. See how these momentum waves are coming up with money flow coming up in your 8 hour, which is just looking great as price came down. So that would potentially be more upside potential. Now, how could we guess where would we take profits? Where could this top out here? Hitting a pocket right there, but I think you could come up higher. Big place to take profits. $22 does look likely in the short term, especially if Bitcoin can jump up a little bit more. The next big place is going to be $23, which is huge right here. I don't know if you can make it much higher than 23 kind of for the short term, based on how the macro looks and all this. And when I zoom out here, what I kind of don't like on Solana right now is see this big point, this historic point here. This was big, this trend line, August 22, November 22, same place you rejected off of in July.
Yeah.
And you're getting a trigger wave to the downside with your RSIs. I drew what I think would happen here. We want to wait till they get kind of close together, which would probably mark a bottom. If it plays out like this trigger wave right here, that was about a 40% decrease. On the bright side, though, if we do come down 40%, that could easily be the bottom, around $14 potentially.
Ooh.
Again, for anything that will survive, I don't see much more than a 40 to 50% decrease from where we are.
So
right now.
we have kind of a running analysis on Solana right now in the crypto pit, and part of it is looking at Solana possibly hitting a $10 zone. Many are looking at the analysis right now around 15. If you were playing this out in the next 6 months, so really probably going to land around, say, end of year, let's say December, what would that chart look like for you on Solana?
The chart in terms of where we could end up in December?
Yeah.
I think it would look it's just a matter of where these RSIs could end up. So it could take more elongated where, let me just redraw them. See these gapped RSIs. Let me zoom in here, what I want to show you guys. So usually price always bottoms when these RSIs come together. See this one's gapped as well. And let's draw what could happen with this one. They could come together right around December, like you're saying. Now, that's a pretty decent decline down. If it's a slow, gradual place down, potentially that $10 mark, that $12 mark, I don't think you're going to go down to $8. Again, I think that probably was the bottom because of FTX. But that $12 mark is really big, especially if we kind of hold this area downward, if it's more of an elongated decline down. And you could also potentially repeat something, I would say here to here. Yeah, see that repetitive thing from that red dot from there to there? That's going to be huge. Maybe only 14 if it's just a slow, apathetic kind of bleed down for Solana. But how I would play this in terms of long-term accumulation, I would start accumulating in September and probably pre-halvening stops. So I think that's a really good about 8-month DCA period, 7-8 month DCA period from September all the way to March, which historically has always been the sweet spot, pre-halvening.
All right, so many of our viewers have been asking us to chart Cardano. Okay, so you look, and we've done a couple of comparisons. We're probably going to do a Cardano video for you guys as well, a breakdown on where the current status of the project is. So make sure and stick around for that. Also, if you like for Evan to be in studio charting like this, make sure and hit the like button. That's one of the ways that we know what you like to see here on the channel. And of course, just drop some comments down below. Evan, let's get over to Cardano because I want to see what is going to happen. It's actually on a little bit more of a rise right now than Solana is.
Tiny bit. Yeah, they're always, those are two fan favorites, the two cult following ones, Cardano, Solana, and then everybody's older who likes XRP now, but yeah. So if we look at Cardano right here, you still have kind of those gapped RSIs coming together. What I'm really looking at here is potentially for this VWAP to come up and get a bull div on the weekly to potentially give us a bottom. Keep in mind, that could take time. And if Cardano loses the 26-cent area from this kind of formation we've been in, you would have more of a technical target around 16 cents, which is a huge historical area right there. So that 15, 16 cent mark is huge. The other thing I'm really looking at for the macro, within the next 3 months or so, this money flow on the 2-week to kind of bottom out and start curving around. Maybe we start curving around. I'll draw it for you. Start curving around maybe in November, December to come up, and then you get a nice bull div there. That's most likely a bottom shy of a black swan event. Where would that be? I would say around, that 15 to 17 cent range on the low end, maybe 10 cents. But just like I've been saying with this actually could bleed a little bit more than Solana potentially. I would say 40% down is around 16 cents. On the low end, probably 50 cents. I mean, you could have wicked down to 10 cents or something, but I'd say the 15-cent range is pretty likely by the end of the year.
A couple of tweets here. We'll jump over to NFTs because you and I have been kind of on a running thing around getting an ape. All right, and doing something there. Claynosaurz, of course, we'll talk about first. Claynosaurz, obviously, this fun little tweet right here, submitted our Solana pitch today. If you look at Claynosaurz, I was just going over to the chart here, and in general, when you look at this as a potential, what are your thoughts on Claynosaurz?
So, I mean, there's potential. I think Claynosaurz just is pretty risky overall. It's a newer project on Solana, ecosystem. Be careful. I would be careful with this. I would be way more comfortable buying a mutant ape or a bored ape right now.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would.
As opposed to, see, many people would have said that in the early state of Yuga Labs and what Bored Ape was doing.
Right.
Oh.
Well, more time. I mean, I'm not an NFT, no fundamentals NFT expert, but I think Bored Apes is a big enough name where NFTs are riskier. I would say NFTs are riskier, but I would rather mess with the Bored Ape. However, on Claynosaurz, when I look at the chart here, it's a full bubble pop pattern. When I look at Solana, when I look at Ethereum, when I look at the charts, I think he would probably come down to potentially a little bit lower, like 19, 18 right there. The all-time high here, which was interesting, was around 99, but that is kind of a blow off top. Let's really say the all-time high was around 90. 98% down would probably be somewhere around that $19, $20 area, which I do think we could hit within the next few months if this survives. This is one of them where it's, obviously a riskier play.
Do we want to add an ape into the portfolio?
Do I want to,
Yeah.
or do you want to? Okay. I like the mutant apes or the bored apes. When I look at these on the, go here on our NFT, thing right now, almost a full bubble pop pattern. These were about, let's see, in terms of US dollars, I think these were, well over, kind of over $1 million, excuse me. If they go down to 20 grand, they're at 40 grand right now. If they go down to 20 grand, another 50%, that's a 98% correction downward, which would coincide with Ethereum potentially going back to 1,200, 1,100, something like that. 20 ETH would be potentially right here. It may be a bit more than 20 ETH. I think ETH is going to come down as well, but that's what I'm looking at over the next few months. If I were to buy these, probably the safest time, honestly, would be kind of pre-halvening early next year, depending. But if you get down to 20K, I'd seriously be looking at this.
All right.
Too.
All right, so let's talk about the market as a whole. We'll wrap up, but I want to get into your predictions. We are playing into what could be a little bit more pressure into a potential recession. We've got enough macro pressure here that is playing into the market. We're getting these wild rides on crypto right now where we see Bitcoin take a real, slice to its market cap and then an interesting pump right after that.
Yep.
So the volatility is there for traders. This is good, for people who are interested in doing that, even swing trades to a certain extent. But if you are parking capital right now and you're looking at, all right, I've got two alternatives. I can go into the money markets where I'm getting paid 5%, or I can move into a little bit more of a risk asset in the crypto markets, but I'm willing to hold in here for the next year. How would you split up that $10,000 portfolio?
At $10,000. So I wouldn't mess with the money markets unless I needed money right away. That's kind of how I would rather, in these types of situations, I'd rather buy gold or silver as something more stable rather than a money market. For a crypto portfolio, I mean, it depends on your risk tolerance. Like if you're somebody who's not least amount of risk, just all Bitcoin. If you're somebody who wants more risk, you could go, 50% Bitcoin, 50% ETH. A good, standard I like to look at is maybe 55, 60% Bitcoin, 20% Ethereum, and then another 20%, altcoins spread around, which I think would do really well. I wouldn't buy everything all at once. I think it's a really good DCA opportunity for kind of the next 6 months. If you're trying to do a lump sum, usually that works the best right before kind of the halvening. So early next year, if you just wanted to put a lot of money, which I would not recommend. I would recommend DCA.
Well, right now, dollar cost average. I mean, these dips that we've seen, when you see Bitcoin go down into the 25K, the 25.5 range was another buy point for us, and we were looking at Solana around $20. Some great opportunities there with a handful of other tokens that. By the way, if you guys are not in our mastermind group, make sure and jump in on that. Also, another thing is Evan has a really great trading channel as well, which you have a group as well.
Yeah,
so
I do a trade Discord group, which is really good, and then the trading course as well on evanaldo.com. The links for both of those are on evanaldo.com.
Yeah, we'll leave a link down below so you guys can get to that. But with that being the case, this next, say, cycle of 6 to 8 months, with enough macro pressure, how many more of these red days do you think we're going to see? Today we're on a green day, but we saw some pretty heavy red days over the past week.
I think if you look at history here, the last thing I want to show you, the big thing I want to show you in the charts I forgot to show you earlier was if you look at the macro on the monthly, this is interesting on Heikin-Ashi candles here on Bitcoin. Let's let me zoom in here a little bit. We're getting a red Heikin-Ashi candle right here on Bitcoin. You see right here,
Yeah.
it's red right there. Let me just, so you can see it better. That's red. And then see September of 2019, 1, 2, 3, 4, until you bottomed out there. Same thing here, red hike in Ashy in August. However, you bottomed out really quickly, but that was a 40% drop down. That was huge right there.
Yeah.
So I think, most likely it's going to be kind of like this. The thing to look at though, the next green kind of hike in Ashy, if you don't, I wouldn't count the pandemic here, next green hike in Ashy confirmed, maybe in a few months, maybe it's, November, December. If you wanted to put a lump sum in, which I don't advise, that's the place once you confirm the next kind of green hike in Ashy candle.
Interesting stuff. I think the key here, again, it just gets back into what you guys are interested in, whether you're interested in crypto or gold or silver or NFTs, or if you see the ecosystem of Web3. There's enough new stuff out there. I think a lot of investors and just people playing the market, this is definitely one of the places to go for sure. All right, listen in, guys. If you are maybe listening to us over on the podcast side of things right now, make sure and jump over here to the YouTube channel because you'll get a chance to see Evan's charts, a full breakdown. We're going to try to bring him back in studio more often as the markets start to heat up. Over the summer, we're taking some time off, trying to do some other things, but obviously we'll get back into that. And also, we love to get your feedback, so make sure and drop some comments down below. And if you are not in the Diamond Circle, get in now. It's one of our free things. We do additional podcasts, more analysis over there, so it's an easy place to do that. If you guys aren't following Evan, hit his YouTube channel.
Yep.
Go over to Aldo.com and check out his trading course as well. And of course, if you guys want to follow me, it's out there on Twitter, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.